Huck Hansen trudged through the driving snow back to his rig parked in the lot of the Fargo truck stop. He had just purchased a bucket of so fried chicken, tube of coleslaw, soft drinks and snacks. He figured that once the small storm blew over, he could be back on the road to Seattle. Driving the northern route in the winter was a definite pain, knowing that in western Montana he would be putting chains on his drive wheels. He was looking forward to cozying up in the well-warmed cab and sleeper of his idling Mack tractor and watching a new DVD he also just purchased. Chuck was an independent driver. He had bought his Mack a couple of years back and was doing reasonably well. His home was in Red Wing, Minnesota, so to speak. He was 27, an Army veteran and never married. A good combination of circumstances for an over-the-road trucker. He stashed his purchases in the cab of the tractor and decided to do a walk-around of the rig to be sure that he wasn't being drifted in. He had started his inspection when he found the boy. Huddled up by the fifth wheel, the kid was in filthy jeans, sweatshirt, windbreaker jacket and torn sneakers. Jesus, he muttered to himself. Where did this little shit come from? At 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with 20 miles an hour breeze and snowing to boot. Dressed as he was, the kid would freeze in Key West time of year. He shook the boy and grabbing the groggy child, picked him up and put him in the cab. He pulled a thermometer out of his emergency medical bag and stuck it in the boy's mouth. Christ, 95 degrees, he discovered. He pulled an old 12-volt electric blanket out of the sleeper and wrapped the kid in it. He also plugged in an electrical cup and filled it with cold coffee out of his thermos flask. In 15 or so minutes the kid began to stir. The coffee was semi-hot and setting the boy up, still wrapped in the blanket, forced the kid to drink the coffee. Don't you dare refuse the coffee, boy. It's Sumatran, freshly ground from beans this morning, whispered Chuck. The boy began to choke a bit, a good sign, and Chuck reinserted the thermometer, 96 degrees. After an hour, boy became coherent and somewhat startled by his surroundings. Are you hungry, boy? Asked Chuck. The kid nodded weakly and Chuck handed him a drumstick, then a breast, some mashed potatoes and finally 2 biscuits. Washing this truck stop feast down with Mountain Dew, the kid appeared to be alive. Where do you come from, son? Asked Chuck gently. The boy just replied, Nashville, in a spot-on Tennessee accent. Do you know where you are? Asked Chuck. The boy shook his head, no. You are in Fargo, North Dakota. A fair piece from Nashville, and you aren't dressed for the weather. The boy just held on to his confused look. Where are your folks? Inquired Chuck. The boy just shook his head. How did you get here? Another nearly fruitless question. Finally, the boy said something. I was riding in a truck, not as nice as this, and the man driving asked me to do something to his dong, and when I refused, he threw me out of his truck here and just drove off. What an asshole, muttered Chuck. For the next 2 hours, Chuck pried the boy's story out of him. It nearly brought Chuck to tears. The described being left at a police station in Nashville. His mother had told him to stay seated on the bench he seated on, that she had to go to the bathroom and that she would be right back. He never saw her again. A search for his mother turned up nothing. His birth records, when found, revealed that his mother had not listed a father on his hospital records. He bounced from foster parent to foster parent for several years until he turned 10, and then he was assigned to the county orphans' home. Finally, after 2 years of abuse, he jumped ship and was picked up hitchhiking by the was-whole trucker. No money, no clothes to speak of, and no family to fall back on, the kid was seriously fucked. Chuck, coming from a solid middle-class family, was having problems comprehending this kid's life, especially in the good old USA. By the next morning, Chuck decided to the kid under his wing. The sun was out, the wind still brisk as it always was in the Dakotas. Chuck told the boy, whose name it 2 hours to get out of him, was Cornell. Chuck asked if he had a nickname, something people called him other than Cornell. After listening to a litany of rather descriptive and uniformly crude renderings of which twerp was the only thing usable in polite company. So Chuck decided that chilly would be the most descriptive. Cornell agreed that chilly was something of an improvement as he shivered wherever he went around the truck stop. Chuck did make a couple of demands on Chili as they approached the truck stop restaurant entrance. Chili, my boy, you realize that you stink to high heaven and your clothes are nothing but rags. I'm going to rent you shower time and get you some new duds. To prove to you that I am not going to run off on you, I am going to sit on the bench right next to your shower stall so that you can keep an eye on me. And, when you get cleaned up, we are going to buy you new underwater, jeans, sweatshirt, boots, winter jacket and a hat. All truckers have hats and if you're gonna ride with me, you're gonna have a hat. Chili just nodded, warily. Chuck reached into the Max glove box and retrieved a 6-foot metal, winding ruler and told Chili to follow him. While Chili showered, Chuck scoured his cell phone for information on boys' clothing sizes, a subject he was totally ignorant of. Before he followed Chili into the shower, Chuck took a waist, inseam, chest and foot measurements. A fellow trucker that Chuck had a better-than-passing acquaintance with came out of a shower stall and Chuck asked him to fill a short list of boys' clothing, enough for Chili to eat and without being asked to leave. Chuck's trucker friend was back with the clothes and change before Chili left his shower. As Chili toweled off, Chuck pointed to the pile of clothes and told him to put them on. As the boy dressed, he started to cry. "What's the matter, bud? Don't you like the duds?" asked a perplexed Chuck. Chili whimpered, "I've never had new clothes before." Tears formed in Chuck's eyes and he asked himself, "Oh my lord, what have I gotten myself into?" With tears rolling down his cheeks, Chuck muttered, "Well, bud, there's a first time for everything." With Chili dressed and labels and tags hanging from his body, Chuck took the boy's old rags and dumped them into a large waste can. Clipping the tags from the clothes, which Chili took issue with and using his comb, Chuck took the now sparkling Chili to breakfast. At the table, Chuck told Chili, "Boy, you realize that we have more shopping to do. You're fine for here in the restaurant but we're going on the road and more rugged duds are needed." For the first time in his life, Cornell felt wanted. Striding proudly across the parking lot, dressed in new jeans, cowboy boots, insulated jacket and Mack truck baseball cap, Chili was carrying 2 large bags of various types of everyday clothing while Chuck carried a large bag of snacks and soda. Helping Chili navigate the tall steps of the tractor, Chuck told him that the next stop was Miles City, Montana. Chuck still had no idea of what he was going to do with the boy. Chuck pondered the problem of the boy for the next 500 miles and still hadn't come up with a solution. Allowing for a couple of peace stops, they rolled into the truck stop in Miles City, an hour after dark. After eating supper, Chili was wandering through the clothing section of the truck stop's odds and ends section. Chuck noticed that Chili was apparently fascinated by the clothes in the small women's and girls' area. Chuck didn't say anything, but kept an eye on the boys' interests. Chuck got them a motel room for night and began to notice the frailty of Chili. Chuck figured that boy's slender body was a history of poor diet. He had seen a lot of that in Afghanistan. Chuck decided that since he was not in a big hurry, that they would stop in Missoula and not do the Rockies in the dark. In Missoula, again Chili seemed to linger in the female clothing area of the truck stop. "I have a question for you, bud. You seem to like looking at ladies' and girls' clothing. Is there a reason or is it just curiosity?" asked Chuck. Chili, sitting on the edge of his motel room bed, replied, "The best foster home that I ever had was a family with 3 daughters. The girls and I played dress-up games. They would dress me in their clothes and put makeup on me, and I would prance around with them as the 4th daughter. Their mother didn't mind, and neither did the dad. He was an industrial salesman and was gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. The caseworker caught me in a dress, and despite the mother's protests, the county put me back into the orphan's home. I was so sad. The best home I ever had, and it was taken away from me because of a dress." Chuck thought, the poor kid never caught a break. Chuck sipped on his can of cola and asked, "Did you enjoy dressing up with the girls?" Chili suddenly became guarded. "Like I said, it was best the home that I ever had, and I feel guilty that I ruined things for the family. They were barred from being foster parents in Tennessee again. It was all my fault, and I feel so terrible about it." Chuck held up a hand. "Don't get me wrong, Chili, I don't care about things like that. If you're not hurting anyone, do it if it pleases you. As far as I am concerned, you can dress up in a barrel, as they will serve you in a restaurant. Do you want to dress like girl? It's no skin off my ass as long as you are presentable in my company." An idea that he hadn't considered began to formulate in Chuck's mind. "Tell you what. Tomorrow morning, we'll stop at that strip mall across the highway. There's a small department store there, and I'll give you $100 and you go in by yourself and buy whatever you want, but remember my rule, you have to be presentable in a restaurant, and I am the judge of what's presentable." Chili's eye went wide and uncontrollably leaped off his bed and hugged Chuck. "Oh Lord, what have I done?" wondered Chuck. The next morning, Chuck pulled his rig off of a side road next the department store, and he and Chili started on the boy's next step. Entering the store, Chili came to a halt and refused to move. "What's the matter, bud?" asked a puzzled Chuck. The boy, seemingly immobile, looked up at Chuck and whispered, "I've never been in a large store before. I don't know what to do." This was a situation that Chuck had never considered. He motioned for Chili to follow him as he walked up to a cashier's station. "Could I see the manager, miss?" Chuck asked the young lady behind the counter. "Is there a problem that I can help you with, sir?" she replied. Taking a deep breath, Chuck said, "My nephew here is going to need some help with his shopping, and I don't feel that I should be influencing his choice by assisting him." The cashier looked at Chuck with a mixture of puzzlement and admiration. "I'll get one of our associates to assist the young man. Please wait over by those chairs." Chili followed Chuck to the row of chairs and sat down next to him. A short time later, a middle-aged woman came to Chuck and introduced herself. Chuck asked her to sit down, and he launched into the unusual request. "If I understand you correctly, your nephew has had some experience with cross-dressing and has expressed interest in pursuing it?" queried the woman. "That's more or less correct," said Chuck. "We are on our way to my home in Seattle," he lied, "so, with us being on the road for next few days, I figured that this could be the perfect opportunity for Chili here to act out his fantasy without unfortunate and lasting consequences." The woman paused and said, "Chili, sweetheart, please stand up and take off your jacket and turn around." After a few seconds, she looked at Chuck. "You know, we may have something here. This may take a while, and I warn you that it may come to more than $100, but I am sure that we can produce a young lady that you can take into a restaurant." Strangely relieved, Chuck just said, "Have at it, I'll be right here." The woman stood and took Chili's hand and said, "I am Mrs. Rogers, and we are going to fix you up, honey. Please come with me." Chuck motioned for Chili to go with the woman. A few minutes later, the cashier came over to Chuck and told him that his project was going to take a while and that he should wait in the small cafeteria. For hours later and halfway through the paperback novel that he had bought, Mrs. Rogers, accompanied by 3 other women and a pretty 12-year girl, appeared at Chuck's table. "Mr. Hansen, the beauty department would like you to meet Sherry." Chuck was amazed, no, more than amazed. The young girl's hair was cut, lightened and formed into a page boy with bangs. Chili now had pierced ears with faux diamond studs, a discreet thin necklace, rings on several fingers, a bracelet and bangles on her arms, all offsetting the semi-short aligned dark wool skirt, pale blouse, wool button-up sweater, dark tights and Mary Jane shoes. Observing Mr. Hansen's approval, Mrs. Rogers added, "Sherry is also wearing light makeup and a training bra with padding." Chuck looked Chili and asked, "Will Sherry, do you like it?" Sherry nodded and gave Chuck a big hug, revealing her perfume to the startled trucker. "Ladies, I wouldn't have believed that this was hiding under the mop I brought in a while ago. Thank you, thank you." "And just how much do miracles cost here?" Mrs. Rogers said, "So far, about $300, but girls are high-maintenance items and Sherry is going to need some girly jeans, tee and sweatshirts, sneakers, another skirt and blouse along with at least 2 handbags. We are looking at about $500. Chuck could do nothing else but nod. 2 hours later, Chuck with Sherry now outfitted in her girly jeans pulled into a different motel and Sherry changed into a skirt and blouse to visit her first restaurant en femme. Following a successful dinner, Chuck sat Sherry down and ran his plan for her by the now more confident youth. "I have a friend in Moses Lake, Washington State that is the Mother Superior of a Catholic convent that runs an all-girls school. I want to stop there and have you meet the lady. If you like the lady and the school, I will arrange for you to be enrolled." Sherry's face began to show concern. "You can't ride shotgun on a big rig forever. For one thing, it would be illegal, and if we were caught, you would be right back in some government institution. The school is well regarded and you do need an education, and if you still want to live as a girl, you need to associate with other girls and develop the proper social skills. Sweetheart, I don't want to see you in another institution, you would never survive. At least let's stop in Moses Lake and meet the people. If you don't like it, we'll think of something else." Suddenly frightened, Sherry suspected that Chuck was trying to get rid of her. It didn't make sense though. He had rescued her, spent more money on her alone in the last 3 days than all of the people she had known all of her life put together had, and asked for nothing in return. She had had contact with government social services and nothing good ever came of it. She desperately did not want to lose Chuck, but knew that he was telling the truth about her riding around the country with him. And didn't he refer to her as his nephew and what was Catholic? Late the next afternoon, the pair arrived at outskirts of Moses Lake. Following another uneventful dinner, aside from Sherry being complimented upon being such a pretty girl, they returned to the motel of the day. Chuck, surprised at Chili's transformation to Sherry becoming so complete so rapidly and so naturally. He was convinced that this was the right course for the girl. Dropping the trailer at a truck stop, Chuck drove bobtail to the convent school. Sherry was both fascinated and intimidated by the school. It was a 2-story brick structure with a statue of a woman wrapped in a sheet out front, and there were older women dressed black and white garb she was unfamiliar with. Chuck had done a number of local hauling favors for the school in the past, towing trailers from here to there locally, at no charge of course. Chuck was a Lutheran by practice and choice, but performing tasks for any church or creed, gratis, was not beneath him. Mother Superior Mary Elizabeth saw Chuck immediately, and with Sherry in tow, the bargaining began. "Mr. Hansen, how good of you to stop by. To what do I owe this pleasure?" "Good mother, I have brought you a problem that I hope that between us can be solved," said Chuck. "An eloquent plea, Mr. Hansen." "Is that problem sitting next to you?" asked the Mother Superior. Chuck nodded and replied, "This young girl next to me, I found huddled next to the fifth wheel of my tractor in Fargo, North Dakota." Mother Mary interrupted Chuck, "So Mr. Hanson, you present yourself at my school with a minor child that you have no legal claim to hand and have transported over several state lines. Is that the crux of this situation?" Chuck had no other defense other than, "Finders, keepers?" Startled by the answer, Mother Mary burst out laughing. "I think I know what you want," continued the nun. "Answer a few questions and I will give you my decision. First, how old is the girl? Secondly, to your knowledge, where is she from? Thirdly, does she have any living relatives? Fourth, is she Catholic? And lastly, how much are you prepared to donate to the school?" Chuck looked at the Mother Superior and said, "You left out a question, Mother." "There's more?" questioned Mother Mary. Yes," said Chuck, "you didn't ask about the girl's actual sex." Surprised, Mother Mary cocked her head and peered at Sherry and asked, "Dear, are you a boy?" Tears started to stream down her face and she nodded, "Yes." Mother Mary told Sherry, "You're quite pretty and you would not be the only boy in skirts here. I am going to have you take a tour of the school and dormitory with Sister Janice while Mr. Hanson and I discuss the situation." The office door opened and Mother Mary's secretary entered and asked, "A tour, Mother Superior?" "Yes, this young lady?" "Sherry," added the Mother Superior. "Yes, Sherry is applying to become a student here, so give her the good tour." Sherry looked at Chuck and he smiled and waved her out. The Mother Superior looked at Chuck as the room emptied. "Okay, Chuck, give me the whole story and leave out nothing." When Sister Janice and Sherry returned from the tour, the Mother Superior told Sherry to sit down and pay attention. "Did you like your tour of our school, dear?" Sherry brightened. "It's the nicest, cleanest place that I've ever seen." Mother Mary accepted that answer with a slightly lifted eyebrow. "You realize that we expect our students to put their best effort with their schoolwork? And those students living in the dormitory are expected to assist in the cleaning of the dorm? Mr. Hanson has suggested that your religious education is virtually non-existent. Although Mr. Hanson is a Christian, he belongs to a minor sect and your instruction will be in accordance with the practices of the Holy Church. If you can agree to these conditions, I will accept you as a student and boarder. Do you agree?" Sherry looked at Chuck, he nodded and Sherry agreed. "Come over here, sweetheart," said Chuck to Sherry. Patting his knee, Sherry sat on it. "I want you to know that I am not abandoning you. I will see you every month. I have a long contract with a company based in Red Wing that takes me to Seattle every month. I will stop and see how things are going, and if you are having problems here that you don't think you can handle, I'll take you with me, okay?" Sherry buried her head in Chuck's shoulder and nodded. "You have a lot to learn and the Mother Superior is the best person that I can think of to do that, and I think that you will be very happy here if you give a chance, okay?" Chuck lifted Sherry off of his knee and taking Sherry's hand and put in Mother Mary's and looking at the nun, said, "I'm giving charge of a blank slate here, please take good care of her." With that, Chuck gave the girl a big hug, a kiss on the forehead and with a smile and a wave, walked out the door. Mother Superior Mary Elizabeth wrapped an arm around the sobbing child. "Come along, Sherry, let's get you settled." Epilogue. True to his word, Sherry saw the semi-tractor with Chuck Hanson trucking stenciled on its doors pull into the school's parking lot. Running across the lot with her uniform skirt flying, Sherry waited impatiently for the tractor's door to open. Chuck stepped down and hugged the girl asking, "How are things going, sweetheart?" The girl smiled. "Uncle Chuck, you were right, I love it here. Chuck smiled.